Brenda and Tom, I thought your song was great. Thank you for that. As you know, I've been following the lectionary when I come and preach. And this week, the passage is from John chapter 11 about the raising of Lazarus. So churches all over the world are using the same scripture. It's rather long scripture, so I hope you'll follow along as we learn about Lazarus and a special event in his life. A man named Lazarus was sick. He lived in Bethany with his sisters, Mary and Martha. This is the Mary who later poured the expensive perfume on the Lord's feet and wiped them with her hair. Her brother Lazarus was sick, so the two sisters sent a message to Jesus telling him, "Lord, your dear friend is very sick." But when Jesus heard about it, he said, "Lazarus' sickness will not end in death. No, it happened for the glory of God, so that the Son of God will receive glory from this." So although Jesus loved Mary, Martha, and Lazarus, he stayed where he was for the next 2 days. Finally, he said to his disciples, "Let's go back to Judea." But his disciples objected. "Rabbi," they said, "only a few days ago the people in Judea were trying to stone you. Are you going there again?" Jesus replied, "There are 12 hours of daylight every day. During the day, people can walk safely. They can see because they have the light of this world. But at night there is danger of stumbling because they have no light." Then he said, "Our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but now I will go and wake him up." The disciples said, "Lord, if he is sleeping, he will soon get better." They thought Jesus meant that Lazarus was simply sleeping, but Jesus meant that Lazarus had died. So he told them plainly, "Lazarus is dead. And for your sakes, I'm glad I wasn't there, for now you will really believe. Come, let's go see him." Thomas, nicknamed the twin, said to his fellow disciples, "Let's go too and die with Jesus." When Jesus arrived at Bethany, he was told that Lazarus had already been in his grave for 4 days. Bethany was only a few miles down the road from Jerusalem, and many of the people had come to console Martha and Mary in their loss. When Martha got word that Jesus was coming, she went to meet him, but Mary stayed in the house. Martha said to Jesus, "Lord, if only you had been here, my brother would not have died. But even now I know that God will give you whatever you ask." Jesus told her, "Your brother will rise again." "Yes," Martha said, "he will rise when everyone else rises at the last day." Jesus told her, "I am the resurrection and the life. Anyone who believes in me will live, even after dying. Everyone who lives in me and believes in me will never die. Do you believe this, Martha?" "Yes, Lord," she told him. "I've always believed you are the Messiah, the Son of God, the one who has come into the world from God." Then she returned to Mary. She called Mary aside from the mourners and told her, "The teacher is here and wants to see you." So Mary immediately went to him. Jesus had stayed outside the village at the place where Martha met him. When the people were there at the house consoling Mary, saw her leave so hastily, they assumed she was going to Lazarus' grave to weep. So they followed her there. When Mary arrived and saw Jesus, she fell at his feet and said, "Lord, if only you had been here, my brother would not have died." When Jesus saw her weeping and saw the other people wailing with her, a deep anger welled up within him, and he was deeply troubled. "Where have you put him?" he asked them. They told him, "Lord, come and see." Then Jesus wept. The people who were standing nearby said, "See how much he loved him." But some said, This man healed a blind man. Couldn't he have kept Lazarus from dying? Jesus was still angry as he arrived at the tomb, a cave with a stone rolled across its entrance. Roll the stone aside, Jesus told them. But Martha, the dead man's sister, protested, Lord, he has been dead for 4 days. The smell will be terrible. Jesus responded, didn't I tell you that you would see God's glory if you believe? So they rolled the stone away. Then Jesus looked up to heaven and said, Father, thank you for hearing me. You always hear me. But I said it out loud for the sake of these people standing here, so that they may believe that you sent me. Then Jesus shouted, Lazarus, come out. And the dead man came out, his hands and his feet bound in grave clothes, his face wrapped in a headcloth. Jesus told them, unwrap him and let him go.
Grief. Good grief is one of Charlie Brown's favorite expressions if you follow Peanuts at all. One particular cartoon, Charlie Brown is talking with his friend Frida, and she says to him, ever worry about growing up, Charlie Brown? Charlie Brown responds, all the time. I do too, she says. I worry about not being able to fit into the responsibilities of adult life and womanhood. Of course, Frida says, I do have one big advantage. Brown asks, what's that? He responds, I have naturally curly hair. Brown responds, oh, good grief. I looked up for some dictionary definitions of good grief and exclamation that expresses surprise, alarm, dismay, shock, or something that is hard to imagine, though it seems to happen on a reoccurring basis. According to another writer, good expression that began quite a long time ago. And it started out with people saying, Lord, such as in, good Lord, deliver us. But for one reason or another, that became taboo. So instead of people saying, good Lord, they changed it to say, after a while, that became taboo. So it eventually turned to good grief. Of course, Charlie Brown made it famous for all of us so that if we ever get feeling at the end of our ropes, we can simply say, this morning, we're talking about good grief, but we're talking about a different kind of good grief. We're talking about the kind of grief that we experience when we suffer a loss. Process of recovering from that loss. Now, there are all kinds of losses that we experience. I have experienced some of these. Sometimes people lose a job, downsizing, or for some other reason, and they have that great sense of loss within. Some people experience loss because their dreams have been unfulfilled or their dreams have been shattered. Loss that they have. Some people experience the loss of mobility or the ability to do some of the things that the process takes its effect, and that leaves them with a sense of loss. We may suffer our eyesight loss or hearing loss or walking loss or things like that. Suffer the decline of health. That's a loss that we grieve. Loss of a relationship through divorce or through a friend moving away. Certainly children know about this loss. Their parents get new jobs and move to a new community, have to move away and they lose their friend. Loss. Go on and on because there are many different types of losses that we experience that we grieve over. Of course, perhaps the biggest one that we know of is death. Death is a loss that we all grieve when someone. In our gospel today, that is what we see happen. Lazarus has died, and his death greatly affects his family and his friends. There's Martha there grieving. On the scene, and he too grieved for his friends. And we see all kinds of other people, all kinds of mourners around who are grieving the death of this person that they loved. Now, as they grieve, them express a variety of emotions. We know these emotions because we too express them in our loss, and we're going to be looking at some of them. But first, we want to kind of notice what has been happening in the story. Now, Jesus is told that his friend Lazarus is very sick. Rather than hurry back, he waits a couple of days before heading back. The disciples are puzzled by this, but he says this is for their good, that they see what is going to happen. And it will be something by the Son of Man. Then after 2 days, Jesus heads back to Bethany. He knows that Lazarus is already dead. He arrives and he finds out that Lazarus has been. Not only did he delay a couple days, but it took more than a couple days for him to get back. Now, as he comes to Lazarus' grave, by Martha, and she says to him, "Lord, if only you had been here, my brother would not have died." If I read this, Lord, if only you had done something. Are natural expressions that we often experience. Later, Mary will greet Jesus in the same way. Lord, if only you had been here, you could have done something. Sometimes want not they had anything to do. I can remember back when I was 7 years old, it was the first death that I had experienced, and it was the death of my Uncle Donnie. Now, Donnie wasn't a blood relative, he was just of my dad. He was so close to us, we saw him as an uncle and called him that. I can remember my dad never crying before that day. That was the first. But I also noticed that he was blaming. I don't know what Donnie died of. I think he died of tuberculosis, but I do know. Sometimes we do that. But we see other expressions of grief in this story. Mary is weeping, and others around her are wailing all around her. And then we see Jesus there. That happened to him. experiences inside this. Not sure what it's about. Some have said that maybe he's just anger himself. But there's anger. Then we see also that he's deep inside. And certainly we know that feeling when we experience grief. Loss is great. So, because it gives us permission to give expression to our sorrow and pain through all the different ways that we might experience that. Loss. That journey of grief can either take us toward greater wholeness, or it can lead us to greater. Like a corn maze. I can remember back a long time ago, and I'm pretty sure, but we went to a maze in Clintonville. Out of wood with wood boundaries and all that, and of course got into this maze and started trying to find my way out. Well, I went down one path and hit a dead end. Nope, this isn't going to work. So I went down another path, tried to find my way out. That wasn't out either. And tried another path and another. Oops, haven't I been here before? I needed help to find my way out of that maze. And grief is like that. Help to find our way out, because grief find in our grief these different emotions. Blame, this regret, this sadness, loneliness, they're all there. Long time ago, I read a book by a Lutheran minister. He writes about the various expressions of grief that are associated with loss. And again, for example, one experience that we might have, or an expression of grief, might be shock. Shocked by what we hear. That diagnosis that we received, that we did. Numb, and we're not sure quite what to do. Loneliness and depression, one of those expressions of grief that we might have. Sometimes guilt. If only I had said this, or only if I had done that, maybe this. There's anger and resentment and also anxiety. What do I do now? How do I respond to this? I don't know what to do or where to go. Stuck in their grieving process, not express, come out in physical illness. They're not sure what to do with these feelings or how to express them. Stomach upset, or maybe something else, has no physical cause. All part. How can we experience that leads to hope? how can we experience? Perhaps we begin by recognizing that grief, rather than deny our grief, allow ourselves time in our society when grief was accepted as normal. And this was expressed so that everybody knew. So, for example, women might wear black veils or black dresses for anywhere up to 6 months to a year, let other people know that they were. And men wore black armbands around their arms as a sign of their grieving. In fact, if we would look back into some of the pictures of history that Franklin Roosevelt wore a black armband to show others that he was grieving. It always bothers me when I'm watching a news article on TV about some terrible accident or days after it has happened, it says something like, well, the people of this community are still grieving. Days, of course they're still grieving. Lazarus' death by his family outside the tomb says, Lazarus, come out. Lazarus comes out. But he's all bound up. So Jesus says, unwrap him and let him live again. Just as Jesus set Lazarus free from these bindings, he can help us experience up to experience joy, loss, death, grief are not the last words for those hope. Talk about when it comes to grief. But I did come across the book that I want to share a little bit out of. A Hallmark book. You go into Hallmark cards, you'll find this little book, and it's a peanut titled Good Grief, Ups for When You Need. So in this book, for example, Ellie and Charlie Brown, their brother and sister, and I don't know what's happening, but they're crying out, ah! You know, the world is just crashing in on them. Across from it, the author writes, go ahead, let it out. And another saying in the book is, do what makes you feel. Another saying is, lose yourself in something you love. like this one. Gotta let someone else rise and shine. All can relate to. A hug. Don't. Perhaps the best way for us to experience God is the one who is with us. God is the one who helps us to build that the normal life will never be the same. God can help us have a new. God can give us the courage. All of us have experienced grief. My prayer for all of us is that we will experience that. God will continue to lead us on that maze